Hello and welcome to Amagi, co-hosted by myself, Dylan Moore of the Volitional Science Network, which you can find on YouTube, and Nima Majur of economicsjunkie.com. We are here to tackle ideas, both ancient and modern, in an effort to bring you the tools needed to expand the power of your worldview, making you a more potent entity, professionally, politically, philosophically, or otherwise. We are graciously being hosted by the Think Liberty Network, which you can find at think-liberty.com. This is episode 19, Why Conservatives Need to Support Ocasio-Cortez. And you'll see that we're doing video for the first time. And of course, by we, I mean me, because Nima apparently is still enjoying his holidays a week after the rest of us have gone back to work in Deutschland, where he seems to be making Grünkohle mit seiner Mutter. So it's up to me to take the reins for the podcast. We weren't able to get that 9-hour time difference to line up where we could be on at the same time. Well, I took 2 weeks off in Hawaii, so I guess it's my turn to take this on my own. So with the Democrats taking over the House and this rise of this young, pretty, dancing, socialist Democratic woman, I wanted to actually get into a little bit of MMT by myself, drifting a little bit away from the evolution of civilizations, which we'll get back to, and look at what's been going on in the last, I guess it's only been a week since the House finally took control, or since the Democrats finally took control of the House. And I'm not here to criticize Ocasio-Cortez, Alexandria, in the same way that most people vaguely right of center and beyond have been doing recently, calling her crazy in every other way, shape, or form. I actually want to give the argument for why we should support her. Because, first and foremost, she's a winner. Say what you want about her policies, say what you want about her arguments or her ideas, but the fact that she's like, what, 29? 28, something like that? She's a 28-year-old who threw out like a 20-year incumbent out of Congress and just swept the slate clean in a very similar way that Trump did, although I guess Trump wasn't a bartender before he started. Where she used social media and essentially has elevated herself to the position of a celebrity. And won. I mean, you can say whatever you want about how stupid she is, but the fact that she's a winner means that we should at least give credit where credit is due. I will give credit to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. You won. Awesome job. Now, I think what also needs to be understood, and this is an apolitical view of this situation, is that the fact that she's 28 when the majority of congressmen, both in the Senate and the House, are like geriatric near skeletons that are running for their 87th term, should give us a little bit of hope, because what this means is the boomers can finally step aside and the millennials can maybe start participating in their own future a little bit, now that we're getting old enough to realize that we should have been doing this 18 years ago. Maybe we could actually start doing it. So I think it's a really, really good sign that the fact that somebody who was a bartender can elevate herself to she's literally reaching celebrity status. You may not have noticed, because I'm guessing most of the people who are going to be watching this have been subscribed to things which are very, very heavily critical of Ocasio-Cortez, but in the right circles, she's really being promoted, I think, in a very similar fashion that Trump was doing during the 2016 election. I mean, on the side that liked him, of course. So, yeah, I think this should give hope to anybody who's younger, who might say, okay, how do I use social media to elevate myself to getting a political position? Now, of course, we all know that being a Democrat, you're more or less going to be supported by the mainstream media quite a bit more than you will be being, like I said, any sort of vaguely kind of maybe right of center, or maybe even a little bit left of center, because it's not quite touching the neoliberal or democratic socialist button. So why should we support this woman? I mean, I know I made the apolitical argument that she's young, but of course the fact that she's young isn't enough to support her. The reason that we should support Ocasio-Cortez is because she's now the figurehead, because she's rising to the celebrity status, and Bernie Sanders is, I think, maybe literally on his way out of everything. Guy's getting pretty old. Is that she's leading the charge of the destruction of the Democratic Party. And MMT, modern money theory, which me and Nima have talked about extensively on this channel, on this podcast, I think is really going to start showing the split. So before I talk a little bit about modern money theory and why that's relevant to this argument, let's recap really quickly what we've all seen since the Democrats took the House. So, in the midst of the let's impeach that motherfucker, I don't remember which congresswoman jumped up and shouted that, but I think that the fact that the House, being controlled by the Democrats of the House, are so willing to be brazenly power tripping, right? We got the power, let's use it. Let's impeach that motherfucker. I had the unfortunate experience of walking into an office building in Bellevue, Washington this week, and CNN was on the screen, and I think they were in the middle of re-electing Nancy Pelosi for Speaker of the House, and they had a list of things to look for from the House, new bills, and I don't know if I'm remembering all of them, but there was impeach Trump. Mueller investigation protection, demanding of tax returns. I wrote some notes here. Oh, yes, and the PAYGO thing, where I'll talk a little bit more about PAYGO in a second. But so they come out of the gate blasting their cannons, very, very obviously power tripping. And what gets me is, in this obvious grasp for power and this obvious display in the fact that they've gotten this power, they don't realize that they don't have any power. Because, I mean, maybe they missed the government class in high school, but we all know that in order for legislation to occur, it's got to pass the House and it's got to be signed by the president. And in order to go over that, you have to get a supermajority to overrun the president. So all they're doing in this, what they think, I guess, is a display of power where they can impeach that motherfucker, is just openly showing how fucking crazy they are to everybody. So not to everybody. So obviously they have a core of supporters that are saying, yeah, let's impeach that motherfucker. We need to protect the Mueller probe. We want to see Trump's tax returns. The people who support that, the Democrats aren't going to be able to deliver. Right. It's just going to be, it's not even going to get past the Senate. And if for some miraculous reason it would get past the Senate, obviously, Trump is going to veto whatever comes across this table from this sort of vein. You're going to be disappointing the more radical people who are in support of this stuff, and the people who are supporting you because they don't really like the GOP and they think it's a bunch of cringy white dudes. They're going to see more and more that the Democratic Party is just completely off their fucking rocker, to the extent that even if they agree that these things should be done, they're doing it in a way that's self-destructive. So, and in particular, so Nancy Pelosi gets reelected the Speaker of the House, and of course, I've got people like my cousin who, he's a great example of this, because I think he suffers from what I like to call excessive conservatism. Like, just imagine one of those Clint Eastwood memes with that grizzled face from like Gran Torino, and underneath it just says excessive conservatism, where they can't stand the thought of Nancy. I mean, I can't really stand the thought of Nancy Pelosi, but I can still step back and analyze the situation without getting overly emotional about it, where they're upset about the fact that Nancy Pelosi is the Speaker of the House. Well, Trump doesn't seem to be. Trump congratulated her on it, saying that she's well deserving of it. I don't know if you guys saw that, but the obvious reason that he loves it is the fact that the House of Representatives has been put in a position where Nancy Pelosi is once again the Speaker of the House. All she does is say off-the-wall bullshit. And, I mean, what's more famous than we've got to pass the bill so you can see what's in it? In kind of a quirky, coked up demeanor. That's a good word, demeanor. While there's shouts behind her saying, impeach that motherfucker. So there's nothing but chaos going on here that's self-destructive, and I think Trump can see it, and he's just putting fuel on the fire. If he's got to wait another 2 years to get some enough Republicans in both chambers of Congress, both chambers of the legislature to not have never Trumpers, so he can get some of his stuff done. I guess he could just wait it out because the Democrats seem bent on destroying themselves. So when we bring this back to Cortez, am I allowed to say that? Do I have to say Ocasio-Cortez every time? I guess people are figuring this out by just calling her AOC. So pay-go is the big deal here. With the Democrats coming in and they introduce this thing pay-go, if you haven't read about it yet, it's essentially saying that anytime the government increases its spending on something, it either has to accompany that with a budget cut or a tax increase. Now, have you been listening to us and understanding the concept of MMT and knowing that me and Nima are MMT supporters? We know that this isn't going to cause an economic crash per se, but it's going to push it in the direction, because we're actually, when considering the foreign trade deficit, our national deficit is actually quite low right now to support a functioning private sector. So Ocasio-Cortez was one of, I believe, 3 Democrats. Bernie Sanders was one, and third one's not coming to my head. Very small amount, who opposed this pay-go thing. And, it's funny to see the pay-go thing coming up, because it's Democrats essentially coming out and saying, "Look, we need to be fiscally responsible and for the government, because you shouldn't spend more than you have." And of course, it's absolutely hilarious that this is coming from the Democrats, because obviously they are the party of, we need to spend. Normally, you would think that this would be from the Republicans, which the Republicans are always introducing this sort of stuff when they're not in power. This idea that we need to inhibit or slow down the spending of the government, I think usually comes from the party that's not in power, not because they care about limiting the spending of the government. It's because they want to hamstring the opposing party, which is in power. Now, MMT, according to MMT, which I believe is accurate, which is why I'm even talking about this, is that the federal government needs to spend in order for the private sector to have any savings to work with in the first place. And the neoliberal, which is the Nancy Pelosi's and the Chuck Schumers and all these dorks, Hillary Clintons and stuff, the neoliberal stance that we need to tax in order to spend is actually fundamentally at odds with any progressive, I was going to say understanding, but understanding is not the word I want. Any progressive agenda for the government, which is, okay, we want things like Medicare for all. We want expanded Social Security. We want free college tuition. Did I miss one? More welfare. Throw money everywhere. Just imagine the memes that were out in the 2016 election with Bernie Sanders throwing money out of somebody else's wallet, that sort of thing. MMT is the only way that they're going to get it, and and of course by that I don't mean if we install a system where the economy is run by MMT. We already have MMT. It's the way that it works. But by understanding it, they can say, okay, look, the government deficit spends, and that's the only thing that it does. It doesn't take tax revenues and spend them. So, and that the private sector needs that money in order to function. Therefore, we can afford Medicare for all. We can afford expanded Social Security. We can afford free college tuition and all these things. And because these things are rights, I completely disagree with this. They're not rights. Healthcare is not a right. School is not a right. None of these things are rights because they're positive. And I think most people watching this will they know the basics of natural rights. However, they are necessities. They are important. I'm not denying the fact that these things are important and that people need them. I'm just philosophically pointing out that they're not rights. So, however, the progressives are beginning to understand more and more and more that the only way that they're actually going to get these is not from the neoliberal tax and go agenda. It's from modern money theory, where there's nothing holding back deficits except full employment. Not inflation, full employment. We need to spend for full employment. Oh, the federal job guarantee. That's the one thing I forgot in that list. The only way they're going to be able to pay for a federal job guarantee is by understanding MMT. And the Green New Deal. Of course, they want this Green New Deal, Green New Deal, Green New Deal. Of course, it comes with, all sorts of gender and social justice and whatever the hell else. I'm not interested. No Green New Deal for me, please. Thanks. Just so we're not confused that I'm supportive of this. I'm just saying that this is the only way that they're going to fund this, in a similar way that the New Deal was funded, is by creating more money, by printing more money. Now, of course, libertarians know this, and they jump up and down and they shout inflation. Listen to our previous episodes. Inflation doesn't automatically come from an expansion of the money supply. Until full employment is reached, and I don't want to say money, I want to say private sector net savings being injected into the economy, assuming it's injected in the right way. There's different ways to inject it. For example, military spending is going to be more inflationary than a federal transition job or a federal job guarantee, because the federal transition job is mobilizing resources that were otherwise not mobilized, that is unemployed people's labor. Whereas with the military, you're taking stuff out of the sector, out of the private sector, where things could be bought and sold, and literally killing people and destroying it, right? If I take a bunch of steel and I make a bunch of bombs and tanks and I go blow them up in Iraq, that's increasing the money supply and decreasing the things that can be bought and sold, because that steel could have been turned into cars or computers or something. So, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, I don't know if she understands it, and I'm going to read from an article here in a second, but she gets it enough that she was willing to stand up to the entire Democratic Party as a brand new congresswoman, just inside Congress, fresh from bartending. And do you think she made good drinks? I think that's an excellent question. I think it'll be really, 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 her story would be extra ultra funny if, in addition to the fact that she was a bartendress before becoming a congresswoman, if her drinks were bad. Man, I really want to know that. Anyway, so she has the balls, or she has the ovaries, to come out and say, I do not support PAYGO because I understand modern money theory. I think this is the crack that's going to represent the schism of the Democratic Party. Is this disagreement over whether, because the progressives, they have their eyes on Medicare for all, they have their eyes on free college tuition, and they have their eyes on the federal job guarantee. And they're seeing that the neoliberals not only, they pay lip service to it in the same way that the Republicans pay lip service to lowering your taxes and not starting a bunch of wars. They pay lip service to it, but they never deliver it. And I think what they saw in Bernie Sanders in the 2016 election was, here is a man who's finally going to actually deliver this stuff. So now they're seeing AOC as someone who is finally intending to actually deliver this stuff. And this is directly at odds with the Nancy Pelosi's and the Chuck Schumers, because they are tax and spend liberals. And ultimately, I think they're they're here to impose austerity. We can get into whatever conspiracy theory we want, but their job is to clamp down and make sure that the United States of America doesn't become a prosperous nation again. I mean, before Trump, it was to maintain the decline from a prosperous nation. Now it's to try to stop Trump from turning it back into a prosperous nation again. But that's just my opinion. I want to get back to AOC. So she's causing this crack, and her opposition to pay-go is really the big thing that's showing it. And as more and more progressives start understanding MMT, and they start, and understanding it isn't even relevant. The fact that they emotionally identify with it, where they say, where someone comes to them and says, look, we don't need the taxes of the rich. We don't need budget cuts from somewhere else. We don't need to cut the military. You can have the Medicare for all. You can have the expanded Social Security. You can have the free tuition. You can have the federal job guarantee. MMT is your answer. A lot of people are just, they're not going to take their understanding past that. They're going to take it and run with it, which is all someone like Ocasio-Cortez needs, or any other people who are going to be starting to come up in tossing these neoliberals who are 120 years old now, or whatever the hell they are. I know Ginsburg is not she's in the Supreme Court, but like she missed the first arguments for the Supreme Court case. Is she still recovering from a lung surgery? Are they letting her vote? Is like there's someone running and saying, "Oh, she's still voting. Here it is." Well, she's still in a coma. I don't know how it works, but these people are getting pretty old, is what I'm saying. So I wanted to look at this article that I found on the Insider. I actually saw it posted on Facebook from a progressive MMT page that I follow, and this is, I guess, quoting Cortez. It's a very long story about how she got to the place that she's in from, growing up in the Bronx and bartending, which I'm, like I said, I'm not here to criticize her for what she actually did growing up. Once again, the important part is she won. The facts don't matter. She won. But I want to look at this because this is where AOC is openly talking about modern money theory. So here we go. Ocasio-Cortez calls constant questions about how she'll pay for her proposals very disingenuous. Not really sure what that means. She argues that there are a myriad of ways to fund free college, Medicare for all, and a federal jobs guarantee. She subscribes to modern monetary theory, a burgeoning theory among some economists, positing that the federal debt is not an economic restraint for the U.S. Quote, "You can pay for it by saving costs on expenditures that we're already doing," she said. "We could do it by saving money on military spending. We could pay for it by raising taxes on the very rich. We could pay for it with a transaction tax. We can pay for it with deficit spending." So this is where, coming back to actually discussing MMT a little bit, I don't know if she actually gets it. Because once you understand MMT, if we look at here, she says we could pay for it by reducing military spending. We could pay for it by raising taxes on the rich. We could pay for it by a transaction tax. And then she says we could pay for it by deficit spending. Anyone who understands MMT knows that the last of this list is the only option. The only way that the federal government pays for anything is through deficit spending. The only thing these other things represent is taking money back out, taking money back out of the economy. Taxation, federal taxation, destroys money. Now, if she subscribes to modern money theory, she shouldn't be saying this shit. She should just say, all we need is the deficit spending, forget everything else. Now, I mean, you can make the argument that she's trying to talk to her base, and she's trying to hit the important point, important talking points, which is fuck the rich. This, what is it? The 70% income tax rate that she wants for the rich, which of course wouldn't apply to the rich because the rich don't pay income tax. Anyone who understands vaguely how the tax code works know that part of being rich is understanding how to play the tax code so the money that you control doesn't fall on your individual head as income. But that's another podcast. To go on, she said modern monetary theory, which holds that the government doesn't need to balance the budget and that budget surpluses actually hurt the economy. True. This is completely true. Absolutely needs to be a larger part of our conversation. Yes, I agree with this 100%. But then she goes on to say Ocasio-Cortez staked out a more concrete position this week when she told 60 Minutes that she supports taxing the super rich, those who make above $10 million at a 70% rate to help pay for programs like the Green New Deal. Again, come on, AOC, which one is it? Are things paid for by deficit spending, or are they paid through taxation? When she talks like this, it makes me think that she fits the category of the progressive I was talking about before, one that identifies with this concept emotionally, where she doesn't actually understand the economic basis of MMT. She's just said she got the memo that this is the way we're going to pay for everything, and she's like, oh my god, this is the way we're going to pay for everything. And I think that's why people make fun of her. She goes on the mainstream media, and when people ask her, well, how are you going to pay for it, she goes, well, you just pay for it, which is true. Yeah, of course you just deficit spend. You don't need to tax. So despite all that, honestly, if I could get AOC on a call, I think that would be pretty awesome. I'd try my best not to be mean about her. I'm not interested in calling her out over whether or not she grew up in the Bronx or anything. I'd really like to talk to her about her specific understanding of modern money theory, because if she subscribes to it, why is she saying stuff like we could tax the rich in order to pay for these programs? Because that's just the neoliberal line, right? We'll tax the rich to pay for crap. So again, in conclusion here, Neva's not here. I am suggesting that, again, conservatives, including libertarians, it's time to support this woman, because this is the crack that's going to destroy the Democratic Party. And of course, we got to talk about what to do about the Republican Party as well, but that's another conversation. I think, again, most of the people watching this see that the Democratic Party is really showing itself to be the crazy. I mean, especially now that the Republican Party is becoming more anti-war. Thank God. I'm sure John McCain is still launching rockets at hell. And I don't know, what do you bomb in hell? You probably just bomb each other. But yeah, I just want to say in conclusion, I think we need to give Ocasio-Cortez like a big pound bag of cocaine and as many megaphones as can fit around her face, because I think the next 2 years are going to be really, really fun watching the Democrats just destroy themselves.